Early in my career, I earned very little. Most of what I made went to paying for my living space, my groceries, and the basics. There wasn't much left over after that, and what there was, I had to manage very carefully. But I had colleagues and vendors who seemed to present themselves in a way I struggled with. They had a particular kind of polish, a beautiful handbag that stood out, shoes that looked fashionable, functional, and expensive, clothing that somehow communicated success the instant you saw them. I watched them, and I made a decision. If I could look like that, if I could project that kind of image, people would perceive me the way I wanted to be perceived. So when my income started to grow and credit became available, I spent on the look, on the image, on what I believed success was supposed to look like from the outside. It didn't work the way I wanted. The debt accumulated, the clothes sat in my closet, polished, expensive, and somehow not quite me. And eventually, I had to spend years quietly undoing the financial damage of trying to dress like someone I wasn't. I learned something then that shaped how I've thought about spending ever since. Luxury isn't what it looks like from the outside. It's what it feels like from the inside. And today, I want to share what that actually means and how it changes everything about the way you spend. Welcome back to Gracefully Lori. I'm Lori. If you're new here, this channel is for women who want to live authentically, express themselves with intention, and move through the world with quiet, modern grace. On this channel, we've talked about redefining luxury, what it actually means to live well without confusing price with value. Today, I want to go deeper into something more personal, what intentional luxury actually looks like, and how to know before you spend whether something genuinely belongs in your life. To do this, we'll look at 5 factors. Ultimately, this isn't about spending less. It isn't about spending more. It's about spending in a way you never second guess yourself. Factor 1. For a long time, I thought luxury was something other people had. Not because I couldn't eventually afford it, but because I associated it with a certain look, a certain signal, the kind that said without words that you had arrived. So when I finally had the income and the credit to achieve that look, I went for it. And what I found on the other side was something I hadn't anticipated. The clothes didn't feel like me. Not because they weren't beautiful, some of them were, but because I had chosen them to perform an identity rather than express my authentic self. I was dressing for how I wanted to be perceived, not for who I actually was. And that gap between the image I was projecting and the woman I was created a strain and a tension I didn't quite understand. Luxury rooted in external validation works that way. It says that you've arrived, and it suggests that you're the woman who would or should wear those types of clothes. But sustaining that picture over time is exhausting because it requires you to keep feeding it another piece, another signal, another proof of having arrived. Intentional luxury works differently. It isn't about what others see when they look at you. It's about what you feel when you put something on, when you walk into a space, when you use something you've chosen deliberately. The soft weight of a natural fabric against your skin, the balanced feel of a well-made object in your hand, the quiet peace of a room that has been curated rather than accumulated. These aren't status signals. They're sensory confirmations that you know yourself. That shift from external validation to internal fulfillment isn't dramatic, but once it happens, the way you think about spending changes entirely because the question you're asking changes. Not, what will this say about me, but what will this do for me? Factor 2. Every intentional purchase begins with a question. Not just, can I afford this? That's always the first consideration, but something deeper and more honest. What will this do for my life? I think about it in terms of 2 things, cost and impact. And I found it helpful to picture them as a simple grid. Low cost, high impact, the lower right quadrant. Easy decisions. These are the things that deliver genuine value without significant financial sacrifice. You don't need a framework to say yes here. High cost, high impact, the upper right. These are the considered splurges, the ones we're taking time with, but worth saying yes to when the impact is real and the cost is manageable. This is where intentional luxury often lives. Low cost, low impact, the lower left. Harmless, but worth noticing. These are the small accumulations that can add up if attention isn't paid. These are the purchases that felt convenient in the moment, but don't actually enhance your life in a meaningful way. High cost, low impact, the upper left. This is where the real damage happens. This is where I spent a portion of my early career paying a high price for things that didn't genuinely help me because I hadn't yet learned to ask the right question before I purchased. The question isn't whether something is expensive. The question is rather what it cost in money, in time, in attention is worth what it gives back. When the answer is clearly yes, you can spend without guilt. When the answer is unclear, that uncertainty itself is information worth listening to. Factor 3. Eventually, I stopped trying to build the look and started trying to build a wardrobe. The difference sounds subtle. It isn't. Building the look meant accumulating pieces that projected an image, regardless of whether they were well made, whether they lasted, whether they actually worked within what I owned. Building a wardrobe meant choosing fewer things more deliberately with a longer view. The moment that shift became clear to me was a blazer. One structured, very tailored blazer. Quality fabric, precise cut, beautiful finishing details, did more for how I looked and felt than any number of the less expensive ones that I had accumulated before it. The seams held differently, the fabric moved differently. The whole thing sat on my shoulders in a way that made everything underneath it look better. I wore it constantly, for years. I received more compliments on my appearance when I wore that blazer than almost anything else I had owned. Placed on the grid, it was a high-cost purchase, but the impact in how I felt, and how I presented, and how long I owned it and loved it made it one of the most intentional purchases I've ever made. The cost per wear over the years I had it was negligible. Quality over quantity isn't a rule. It's a recognition that the things we choose carefully tend to serve us longer, better, and more honestly than the things we accumulate quickly. One thing chosen well is worth more than 10 things chosen carelessly every time. Factor 4. Even in the years when I had very little, I traveled. Not comfortably, not always. There were shoestring budgets and careful planning, and the kind of resourcefulness that comes from wanting something badly enough to find a way. But I traveled, especially internationally, because I understood, even then, that what travel gave me wasn't something I could acquire any other way. It expanded how I saw the world. It expanded how I saw myself in it. I willingly sacrificed other things, other purchases, other comforts to fund the kind of travel that genuinely changes me. Not because travel is more virtuous than any other spending, but because for me specifically, it delivers a return that nothing else does. It fulfills something that objects simply can't reach. That's the strategic splurge. Not an impulsive indulgence, a deliberate investment in something that genuinely enriches your life, something you've identified through honest self-knowledge as worth prioritizing above other things. The strategic splurge looks different for every woman. For some, it's travel. For some, it's an exceptional piece of clothing or jewelry held for years. For some, it's an experience, a course, a concert, a meal at a restaurant that represents something meaningful. What makes it strategic isn't the category, it's the clarity. A woman who is splurging strategically knows why she's spending. She knows what it gives her, and she's willing to make deliberate trade-offs to have it. Not because she's reckless with money, but because she's honest about what actually matters to her. That honesty is one of the most elegant things a woman can cultivate. Factor 5. In 2007, I took up ballroom dancing. It wasn't an inexpensive decision. Lessons, competitions, dresses. The investment was real and ongoing, and there were moments, particularly in the early years, when the practical side of me questioned it. But dancing does something for me that very little else does. It lights something up. It pushes me past the boundaries of what feels comfortable, because I tend towards reserve when it comes to this kind of physical expression. And dancing has gotten me to move past that reserve deliberately, repeatedly, over time. Every lesson, every competition, every moment on a floor I'm not entirely sure of, it's expanded me in a way I couldn't have anticipated when I began. The skills I've built, the confidence that comes from doing something difficult in front of other people, the memories of specific moments on specific floors in specific cities. These aren't things that sit in a closet or depreciate with time. They became part of who I am. That's what experiences offer that possessions rarely can. A beautiful object brings genuine pleasure, and I'm not suggesting otherwise. But experiences chosen intentionally tend to compound. They add to you rather than simply surrounding you. For an elegant woman, her home is a sanctuary, not a showroom. Her clothes are tools for confidence, not proof of arrival. And her most meaningful investments are the ones that expand who she is, not simply what she has. The goal isn't to accumulate more, it's to live more fully. Intentional luxury isn't about a budget. It isn't about a price point. It isn't even a philosophy about spending less. It's a way of knowing yourself well enough to know what genuinely enriches your life and spending in alignment with that knowledge without guilt and without apology. Internal fulfillment over external validation. The value-aligned question before every purchase. Quality chosen carefully over quantity accumulated quickly. The strategic splurge that reflects honest self-knowledge. And experiences that add to who you are rather than simply surround you. This is what elegant women know about intentional luxury. Not what to buy, how to choose. I'd love to know, what does intentional luxury look like in your own life? Is it an object, an experience, or something else entirely? Please tell me in the comments. I read everyone. And if this resonated with you, please like the video. It helps other women find content that might be meaningful for them too. And if you enjoy discussions about graceful living, please consider subscribing. Until next time, my graceful friends.